I don't think I was that smart when I was that age. And it's a tough act to follow, especially at my age. No, I have been asked to talk about the BRICS. Big congratulations to South Africa that it has been included as part of the BRIC countries, which, as you know, is a very, very big deal. But before I make those comments, let me briefly mention about the branding. I'm a marketing professor at the University of Texas at Austin. I've been there for many, many years. Before that, I taught at Ohio State University and also the Wharton School. And ladies and gentlemen, in marketing, you start with the branding because first thing that we teach our students is that there are no commodities. Everything can be differentiated. And that's how we differ from the economist. Because if things cannot be differentiated with the commodity, the whole competition is on the basis of price. And that's something we don't like. Second comment that I'll make here is that why the branding is so important to us in the US, and why the branding, I'm so glad to see that this is a major project in South Africa and part of South Africa. You have to think about the fact that the United States economy is about $15 trillion. So almost about 22% or 25% of the world economy is in the hands of 308 million people in the United States. But that's not interesting. You probably all know that it's a huge economy. If something happens in the United States, the rest of the world gets fever. What is interesting is that 70% of that economy is controlled by my daughter and her friends. That is 308 million of us. So if you take 70% of 25%, ladies and gentlemen, almost 20% of the world economy is controlled by the United States. Not interesting. What is interesting is that almost every country on this planet wants to sell to the largest market in the United States. Competition is intense. If you go back and look at the list of the Fortune 500 companies, right from the, let's say, 60 years, you will see many of them don't even exist anymore. That's how bad the competition is. And there are only two ways that we can convince somebody to take their money out of their wallet and give it to the company. One is here, one is here. And this normally doesn't work. This works. And that's what branding is. So ladies and gentlemen, this project, I'm so glad to see that you are doing this project. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Africa Rising, I started this project in 2004. I traveled for 3 years before I started having backaches. And this project actually was suggested to me by my students in my class. These books are my hobby. They are not my mainstream research. And I had written a book called 86% Solution. The reason it's called 86% is because 86% of the world population lives in developing countries, like India, China, Africa, and so forth. I'll comment on that later. So I was challenged that I had nothing to say about Africa. So I traveled for 3 years, many, many countries. But I'll just give you a couple of examples for branding and how important it is, and how different it is going to be from country to country. As you know, that Africa also happens to be the largest market for many of the used products. For example, those of you from Nigeria, you already know about the automobile industry, the Belgians. You have the used clothes. You also have the used mobile phones, so and so forth. So interesting thing was that in Nigeria, I was visiting one of the major advertising agencies, and I asked the gentleman, probably in his 30s, I said, what car do you drive? He says, of course, BMW. And I said, how many miles do you have? Oh, doesn't make a difference. I have 70,000 miles. How much did you pay? He told me the price. I said, do you realize for the same price that you can probably get a couple of Chinese cars? And he looked at my face as if I had said something so dumb. He said, Professor, you don't realize I cannot impress my girlfriends with my Chinese cars. Ladies and gentlemen, that's for the branding. And as a matter of fact, almost every country that I went, I had to rent a car. I had to have a driver. And the first thing the driver would show me the shirt with a crocodile or some other symbol on their shirts. And of course, they have bought them in the used market. Africa is one of the most, many countries in Africa are one of the most brand conscious people that I have seen in the 70 plus countries that I have visited. It's not a coincidence that you can get the old Nokia phone for $10, $15, $5, depending on the company. And it's not a coincidence that Nokia wants to organize their market, and they decided to open a plant finally in Kenya, because when the economy gets better, people migrate, they want them to migrate to their brand. So ladies and gentlemen, branding is the most important thing that the African countries can do, including creating an image in the rest of the world. Now, let me come to my presentation. So what I'm going to tell you, I think one of the gentlemen already showed you this slide. When I started my journey in 2004, I also looked at it. One of my students gave me from the internet, and my God, it was so intimidating. And it would be more even intimidating for South Africa, because what I'm going to tell you is that South Africa should not congratulate that they have been included in BRICS. South Africa now has an obligation. They have an obligation how to represent the rest of the continent. And when you look at the size of this, area-wise, they'll be representing a China, they'll be representing an India, and they'll be representing the United States of America. This is how their tough job is going to be. And they have an obligation. In my opinion, South Africa is going to play the same role that Singapore did 20 years ago in Asia. As you recall, at that time, many of the multinationals did not want to open their offices in India. Many of the expat managers were not willing to go there. Again, the perception. Poverty, poor people. They did not want to go to China. Back in 1991, when I went to Beijing for the first time, there was literally a person sitting on a desk who stamped my passport. Singapore played a major role, because Singapore had the infrastructure, telecommunication, transportation, education system, and many of these executives from Singapore used to fly to India, including Microsoft and others, to do their business. And after 20 years now, you cannot even find a space in Bangalore. So South Africa has an obligation to play the same role that a tiny country like Singapore played for a major continent, Asia. Now, I'm also very happy to see when I started this 2004, I was told that many of the countries I simply would not be able to go because there is no transportation. So I had to fly back to Europe and come back to the other country. As a matter of fact, none of the American airlines at that time were flying here. And in fact, I had mentioned that in my book. A challenge, why they are not flying to Africa directly. No, of course, you get Delta and a few others to fly here. And of course, South African Airways was flying at that time. No, my point here is that the South Africa needs to provide the same infrastructure. And not only that, this is also a challenge to multinationals that you cannot manage 1 billion people on this planet by having your offices in Dubai, by having your offices in Paris, or by having your office in London. You have to smell your customers. You have to smell their clothes. You have to go to their death ceremonies. You have to go to their birthday parties. And I'm very glad to see that some of them finally are moving their offices to Johannesburg, Kenya. For example, Standard Chartered Bank is going to move here. Coca-Cola, after 90 years, finally they moved to Johannesburg 3-4 years ago. So if this multinational wants to do the business, they have to do exactly what the multinationals have to do, move from Singapore to China and India, where the billion customers are. Now, let me quickly mention about the BRIC countries now. And the reason that I have there is that when I started my journey, by the way, until 6 years ago, I was also one of those persons who was listening to the CNN and watching all those news from Christiana Manco, that how bad Africa is. And I'm an educated person. I have written several books. I do a lot of consulting. But that's my impression was. But nothing came as a surprise when I started traveling in Africa, in terms of languages, in terms of the religion. I did not know that 1/3 of the Muslims on this planet actually live in Africa. I mean, I went to churches, I went to Hindu temples, I went to synagogues, churches of every denomination. I mean, look at the tolerance that this continent had and how welcoming the continent is. Now, in terms of the BRIC countries, I'm sure you have seen these numbers, but from the marketing point of view, there are 4 numbers that I'm going to point out. First, I want you to look at I'm sorry, I can't see this from here. First number that I want you to, and it's very important that you look at it, it will also explain how the dynamics among the BRIC countries are going to play. First number that I want you to look at there is the GDP per capita, which is the third number, third column. And notice there that 2 countries among the 5 countries actually have a GDP per capita more than $10,000 US. Now that number is going to be critical for our discussion here. Second number that I want you to look at is the household consumption. I just mentioned that in the United States it's about 70%. And what you noticed here is China has the lowest, about 38%. About 36%, and the highest is, which one is the highest? Brazil is the highest, and South Africa is about 60%. That number is also very important from the marketing point of view. Third number that I want you to look at there is the shadow economy. And the shadow economy basically means the informal economy, the economy that does not show up in the World Bank's numbers. So for example, if you're in Lagos, you go buy a car, you have to take a car to buy a car because you'll be keeping all the nairas in that car to buy a car. Truckload of money you take to buy a car. That number is critical. The last number that I want you to pay attention in terms of the dynamics which I think are going to take place among the BRIC countries is urbanization. Noticed here, among these 5 players, the highest urbanization is with Brazil, 86%. That number is going to be important for our discussion. Noticed here, the lowest number that you see is with India, which is 30%, and China is less than 50%. It's also going to be important number for our conversation. Now, let me explain that in the next few minutes. What do I mean by this? Let me first take the number $10,000 US per capita. Why that's critical? And by the way, this slide also indicated that these numbers do vary throughout the continent. If you look at the urbanization, not everybody is urbanized like South Africa is. You look at Kenya, you look at Uganda, you look at informal economy. Not everybody is like the South Africa. Nigeria, God bless them, they have a very high number. Now, this is the table which is very critical. And this table is going to tell you why the rest of the world simply cannot afford to miss Africa. And why the decision to have South Africa to join was such a strategic decision. What this chart shows, this is from my book, 86% Solution. And what this chart shows there is that the critical point is GDP per capita of $10,000 US. It took Japanese, the largest country, after the Second World War, to hit that point of $10,000 US in 27 years. And that number has become a magic number for many of the developing economies, especially those who started in the 1990s, like India, China, and a few others. The 2020 vision is that you take 1990s, add 27, and you get 2020. Not interesting. Interesting question that you need to ask yourself is that since 1948, other than the Japanese, how many countries on this planet have managed to hit that critical point of 10,000 US dollars per capita, GDP per capita? And by the way, that number was made very popular by managing director of Japan, Kenichi Omaha, in 1980s. And the story looks so similar now with China and India now. In 1980s, late 1980s, he wrote a book called Try of Power. He was a champion for Japan. He tried to argue that on this planet, the whole game is going to be played by the Japanese, Western Europe, and the United States. And forward that to 20 years or 30 years, and you know how the dynamics have changed. And in fact, he used that number, 10,000 US dollars, which is used by the development economists, to actually show how the country changes, how its needs change over time. Now, other than Japan, you'll have to literally count on your fingers. GCC countries, Taiwan, South Korea took about 47 years to get to that point. Singapore, in fact, Singapore in 1980, those of you who have gone there used to have a sign at the airport, we're going to be next Switzerland. Anyhow, to cut this story short, ladies and gentlemen, less than 300 million people on this planet have managed to become part of a country with a GDP per capita is more than 10,000 US dollars. So why did I say that? Because last year there was a big celebration, and this big celebration came from Brazil, because Brazil finally hit the economy of 2 trillion, and my God, there was a celebration that they finally joined that 14% club. Huge. I think they actually made a mistake. They first released the data, which everybody started criticizing, and they said, no, it's just a little bit exaggerated, but it's actually really 2 trillion. So among these BRICS countries, Russia also had that number, they've also finally hit it, but there's no guarantee to this number. Because if you look at South Korea's graph, South Korea hit 10,000, went down, hit 10,000, went down, hit 10,000, went down, and finally now it's about 14 or 15,000 US dollars. So there's no guarantee to this. But the fact of the matter there is, when you look at this graph here, 2 of the 5 big countries have managed to become part of the 14%, and that's Brazil and Russia. Again, not that interesting. What is interesting here is what strategy each one of these countries actually using to approach the rest of the world. Indian, for example, software companies, Infosys, for example, they come from 86% country. Most of their revenue came from Cell C because they made that money by focusing on the developed world. Western Europe, Japanese, United States. And now finally they're opening up and they realize maybe there's something going on in the Cell D also. Ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, Chinese, for example, are very clever. Chinese not only worked with the Walmart to go after the Cell C, but they also went to Africa and India. In fact, they are one of the largest trading partners with India. They also went after Cell D. The US companies until 15 years ago had totally ignored Cell B because they were coming from the developed world and they were going to they had no intention of going to the developing world. Case in point, Africa. Before this break, I met a gentleman here from the Young Brands, and he was telling me this story, how the Kentucky Fried Chicken now, they have moved all over the Sub-Sahara. They had no intention of doing that 5 years ago. In fact, I called them. No intention. Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, the wakening call now for the 14% of the world data is that you simply cannot ignore Cell B, which is the 86% cell. Now look at that now. Cell B. Next month there are going to be 7 billion people on this planet. 7 billion. So guess where the people are? Where the consumers are? 86% of the world. 14% is shrinking. So every smart person sitting in New York, sitting in Brussels, sitting in Germany, I mean, they simply cannot ignore the fact that cell B is the way to go. And finally, even the companies who are coming from 86% are realizing that they need to go to cell D. And who are the major players in cell B and D? Chinese, 1.3 billion. Indians, 1.2 billion. And guess who's the next? Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have the strategy for these three, you've got at least the 60 to 70% of the people in the developing world. Nobody. And when you take the 7 billion people and you take out the billion people who live in the 14% of the world, you are left with 6 billion. So that means every sixth customer on this planet in the developing world is Africa, and which dumb CEO is going to ignore every sixth customer in the developing world? They dare not. They dare not. So I'm going to conclude this. Since I was given that 30 minutes, and we'll have this discussion of it. I'm going to conclude this by saying that South Africa needs to go with a position of strength. They really need to go with a position of strength when they go to the BRICS meetings or when they go to the global platform. Why? Even if you take out North Africa and Egypt, they still got 800 million people. And ladies and gentlemen, those 800 million people is not a charity case. It's not a charity case. I'm going to show you here 7 trends that I had observed. And mind you, this is from an outsider who knew nothing about Africa and whose knowledge was based on CNN. It was not easy to get these interviews because I was told that many of these people refused to give me the interview because the first question they will ask is, why an American professor is interested in coming here? Are you from CNN? I'm telling the truth. In fact, you will see that in the book. I had to convince these people that Africa is richer than what you think. As a matter of fact, ladies and gentlemen, at that time when I added the GDP for all the 53 countries, GDP for Africa was the same as much as India. In fact, right now, if you look at the new data, they are neck to neck. As a matter of fact, GDP per capita of India and Africa is more or less the same. Okay? I had to convince these people that there is a market. And that data did not come from me. That data came from the advertising agencies, and that data came from my talking to the companies. As you know, in most of these countries, we divide the market in A, B, C, D, E. Those of you from the advertising agencies, you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes they even have B1, B2, C1, C2. At the end of the 3 years, when I looked at the data, what dawned on me was Africa 2, the group C. Ladies and gentlemen, the group C, and these are not my numbers, these are numbers that I collected from all these guys. The group Africa 2 is anywhere from 300 million, 30% to about 50%. This is the range. Maybe in some countries it's more, some countries it's less, some country definition is different. That gives you about 300 million people in Africa too, and you divide that by its average size of the household 5, you get 18 million households who will be identified in Africa too. And ladies and gentlemen, that's the excitement that you hear about China and India. That's what led me to conclude that Africa is as big market opportunity as China and India. Africans are second to none. And they're not asking for charity. They're asking for product solutions. They're asking for service solutions. And who is this Africa to? I was so proud of that young lady from Senegal. She mentioned about the teachers. These are the teachers who are in Africa too. And they work hard because they want the next generation to be better than them, just like my parents were. I come from my father was a small businessman. They raised 10 of us, sent all 10 of us to education because that was their priority. And thank God for my mother that I'm sitting here today. Africa too cannot be ignored. And most of the informal economy probably is with Africa 1, which is A and B, and thank God for the shopping malls all over Africa. No, they can buy all the branded products here. They don't have to go to Paris for shopping. All the power. Cheetah generation. What you saw in the previous was cheetah generation. I'm a hippo generation. I still have the memories. I grew up, my father telling me the stories how bad the Britishers were. I was brainwashed. Because if the small businessman, he used to go to Bombay for his textile shopping, he could not stay at any hotel because the Indians and dogs were not permitted. And that's how he had grown up. But my brother children have no such memory. They are as excited as the panelists that you saw. They say, we can do it, we will do it, we must do it. We are not going to retreat. And the next one I have is emergence of organized markets. No, that market is the same as you see in India and China, because I'm glad that Walmart is coming here. Africa is not a media-dark continent. For example, I don't know if you have seen the movies from Nollywood. I mean, these guys make a movie for $15, or $15,000, or $10,000. I kept on wondering, what the hell is wrong with Disney? Why they are not here? I mean, they go to China, they're building all those parks, they are going to India, they're making all those movies. What the hell is wrong with them? And this is the youngest continent on this planet. Why can't they organize the Nollywood industry? For $50,000, they'll get a wonderful movie. I kept on wondering why Coca-Cola is not doing the product placement, advertisement on these Nollywood movies. Can you imagine that? All those Nigerians staying in Houston, Texas, they all watch Nollywood movies. All those Ethiopians staying in Washington, D.C., they all watch Nollywood movies. Then the last thing that I have is active African diaspora. This African diaspora, ladies and gentlemen, is as active as the diaspora is in India and China, especially the immigrants. I do not know if you know that the fourth largest immigrant group in the United States is from Africa. Number 1 is Mexicans, number 2 is Chinese, number 3 is Indians, number 4 is Africans, and they send $40 billion every year, more than the foreign investment, direct investment, to Africa. And they are not only sending money, they are building homes for their parents, they are starting small businesses, they are supporting the Nollywood industry, they are building schools, they are building hospitals, and more important than that, they are bringing talent. The previous CEO who moved Coca-Cola's office from London after 18-90 years, Alex Cumming, is a Liberian American. And finally, this morning, we had a lot of discussion about the Ubuntu market. There's a gentleman that's absolutely right. One thing that defines Africa is Ubuntu. Companies will survive because they want their employees to survive. Companies will survive because they want their customers to survive. The customer will have to help the companies because they want their product. And Ubuntu is going to make sure that only the companies who understand the concept of Ubuntu will survive in Africa. Thank you so much, and God bless you.